Hi, and welcome to today's lecture on Jamieson et al.'s book chapter, Are Attack Ads Necessarily Negative? As you'll find out, the authors claim no, they're not necessarily negative, but we need a clarification of terms because not every ad that shows up in a campaign should be considered negative. So let's start out with just a little overview of political advertising, which I think you more or less understand, that ads are part of contemporary politics. It's how we come to understand candidates and their policy positions. Ads are considered by some to be a useful source of information during elections. But there are two conditions that make it hard for voters to get anything meaningful out of these ads. And the two things are ad hominem attacks, so focusing exclusively on attacking the character of your opponent. That's what an ad hominem attack is. It means to the man. Or false claims. So if the information contained in the ad is inaccurate, then people are not becoming better informed by watching it. The authors point out, so Jamieson and co-authors point out, that there's a lot of confusion when we talk about negative advertising. And the confusion has to do with what's negative anyway, and if it's all an attack ad or what's going on there. So the authors tell us that false ads are negative because they do the public a disservice, and only factually accurate ads can inform the public. This is a little bit repetitive. So we've got two views of negative ads. On the one hand, we have those that the authors think are acceptable. Things could be contentious, argumentative, and critical and still be a force for good in the public. So if you criticize your opponent's record, character, and plans, sometimes that's relevant, and that's information that the voters need to know. On the other hand, if the ad is mean-spirited, nasty, inaccurate, or offers unfair criticism, then that sort of cheapens the democratic process, according to the authors. So the authors also tell us it's useful to differentiate between three kinds of ads, or among three kinds of ads. There are candidate advocacy ads, and this is one-sided praise for a candidate. Usually this is the kind that has the most inaccurate information. So it's all flattering, it's all self-aggrandizing, and sometimes this is where we get things that are a little bit deceitful. Then there are candidate attack ads. These are one-sided attacks. Sometimes these contain policy content, and sometimes these are ad hominem. These are ad hominem attacks that only say petty or not very helpful things about the candidate. And finally, there are candidate contrast ads, and these are the ones that the authors prefer the most. So these compare two candidates. They tell us the relevant differences in the policies proposed by the two candidates, and still there's some attack content here because of course you want yourself to look good compared to who your opponent is. But these are the ones that the authors support the most. So the authors also bring our attention to the idea that candidate attack ads and candidate comparison ads are both considered negative in the literature. So people are really sloppy when they tell us what kind of ad they're classifying as negative. So this is something to pay attention to. Candidate advocacy ads have more deceptive information than any other kind of ad, so that's review. And then we've got to get to two viewpoints about the effects of attack ads, because there are many people who say these are bad for democracy, and there are people who say these are good for democracy. And the reason why scholars are able to come to both conclusions about attack ads is that they have very different methodologies for studying how audiences react to attack ads. So on the one hand, we have authors like Iyengar and Ansola Behere who say that attack ads suppress voter turnout, but their methodology usually involves creating a facsimile of a real election environment and asking audiences in a controlled, simulated setting what they think about different fake candidates. So this is different because it's not relying on the same kind of cultural context that we actually experience when we see these ads. So these authors say attack ads are effective. They suppress voter turnout for people who see their own candidate get slammed. So if you're a Trump supporter and you see Trump criticize, it could have the effect of making you less interested in voting for him. So there could be a chilling effect. They also say that attack ads can create blanket negativity about an election, so everyone feels a little bit disdainful towards the election because they are tired of how negative and unpleasant it is to exist in society when we're just inundated with a lot of negative ads. And then finally, these authors, Iyengar and Ansola Behere, suggest that attack ads can make voters cynical about the election process and politics, full stop. So this could make people feel disengaged. Oh, it's worth pointing out, revisiting the second item on the list here, that voters may have negative feelings about the people who are represented poorly in attack ads, but they don't carry that negative opinion over to the people who are sponsoring the attack ads, apparently, according to Iyengar and Ansola Behere. Although I know from class discussions that a lot of you had negative opinions about Tom Steyer when he was doing his self-promotion ads because you were just tired about seeing his face. So this is a little bit outdated. It's not taking into account social media advertising and the kind of repetition that we get there. Okay, so on the other side, we have a different viewpoint that Jamieson and her co-authors talk about, and this is a study by Finkel and Geer, and they say, well, actually, attack ads are kind of good for democracy because this is where people learn about policies that can actually inform them and help them make better decisions in the election. So campaign literacy leads to campaign involvement. Finkel and Geer also say that voters pay more attention to negative information. So when you see someone openly insulting somebody else, you get your popcorn bucket and you watch that. That's a little bit more memorable than the very by the book, I'm a Boy Scout, vote for me kind of ad that you see. So attack ads are entertaining and we remember them better. Then viewers have stronger affective responses to negative ads or attack ads, depending on which way we're defining these things. And when you feel kind of feisty about something, you might translate those elevated feelings into participation by voting or canvassing or whatever it may be. So then we're back to Jamieson and her co-authors, and she says, negative ads, in her study, contain more relevant policy content than positive ads. So negative ads, if we think about contrasts and even takedown ads, those are both more useful for voters than self-flattering ads, and they have more robust information. So the authors do say when you code ads and you're looking at what's in the content of a whole bunch of these attack ads, you'll see that there's still a lot of non-policy or junk food information alongside policy content. So what the candidate stands for and what their plans are may appear as a minor factor compared to the kinds of character points that are made instead. So we'll see someone talk about what a good person they are and like incidentally they stand in favor of Medicare for all or what have you. So policy content will give us an actionable kernel of information, and it's still appearing alongside kind of frivolous, fluffy information too, which audiences still expect and kind of need, but it's maybe not educating us. So advocacy ads, these are the ones that are like, vote for me, I'm the best. Those tell us what a great person the candidate is, but they don't really tell us very much about what the person's going to do. So advocacy ads are the least useful, according to Jamieson and co-authors, for a democracy. And then we get to contrast advertising, and this is the kind of thing where it's compare and contrast. Vote for me because the other guy is against these things and I'm for these things. So we get more rich policy information in the contrast ads. And the authors say maybe that's not even relevant to call that an attack ad. In the end, when you read this, I think it becomes pretty clear that it's difficult to study whether attack ads... Sorry, I got a corgi intervention. It's difficult to study the nature of attack ads or negative ads, and it's difficult to identify how much policy content there is in different kinds of ads. So it's hard to know how exposed people are to different ads. It's hard to know what people thought before they saw the ads compared to after they saw the ads. Simulations, like the ones that the first set of authors in the Lit Review talked about, don't really represent reality. And so people have to come up with different tricks to accomplish their studies, to answer their research questions. Jamieson and her co-authors looked at the percentage of policy words in argument to account for differences in length of ad and to distinguish between one argument and the next. And I think this study is helpful, but I don't know that there is any perfect solution to the problem of studying the role of negative advertising in society. The conclusion that these authors arrive at is that contrastive advertising is the best for citizens, for voters, because it's rich in policy content and it gives us a side-by-side comparison of how different candidates would react to social issues. But the authors don't think that that can rightfully be called attack advertising because it's simply giving us the tools that we need in order to vote. So that's part one of this series on attack ads. And I will come back with a little bit more detail from other resources and a couple of examples.